Mike says, "Father, would you please watch your language?" If I could have gotten hold of him, I would have killed him. I would have ripped his ears off. Oh, that was my last ski trip, and I shall probably never try again.
No, I'm not going to bother again. I don't think I will either.
Like me and the motorcycle ride, that was both rides.
Yep, both rides. You know, finally after, oh gosh, I guess those two kids stayed with me probably for a good hour, and I'd made it 30 feet down the slope. You know, it was a disaster. And I finally says, "Hey, you guys go on and have fun. Some way or the other, I'll make it down. If I have to take these things off and slide down this hill on my bum, I'll get down. Just go have fun." And that's just about how I made it, actually. But I finally, well, when I finally met him, I made it down the hill once. And when I finally met them, they had made 7 rides up the lift and back down the hill.
Oh my gosh.
But I got down at the bottom, and I was finally doing, you know, I was getting a little longer runs between my falls. And I was standing up on the skis, catching my breath, and I was saying, well, what it is I'm a little older. And things like this are a little hard to learn when you're a little bit older. You know, it's reasonable that the kid, you know, I feel pretty good. I've done all right today. Because I'm a little bit older, and just at that time, a guy came past me who made Aunt Mary look like a child. The guy had to be 92 years old. He had a great big old gray beard. And just swoosh! Yeah, miserable!
Our skiing up in Park City when I first went up to stay with Mary was pretty primitive. You had 7, 8 foot boards with just a toe strap really in it. If you intended to, well, we finally modify them by riveting some more straps around the heels and even across the ankle. But we promoted the guys down at the Spiro Tunnel to let us ride in on Saturday morning with the maintenance crew, and then go up the west end shaft or up the Thames shaft and come out at the surface, which for a while was used as the ski lift up there, but this was way back. That put us out just so we could easily walk over the crest of the hill into Thames Canyon, the West Canyon there. And the only skiing we ever did was to point ourselves directly down a slope, you know, and then take off the skis and stomp a trail and walk back up to the top of the reeds. And, some guy described it one time, skiing in Utah consisted of and walk a mile. It finally came time to go home, and the route was down Thames Canyon. The old wagon road was still quite clear. There was no brush in the road. So with a little care, you could ski all the way back down to Thames Canyon, there to the Spiro Tunnel. We gave ourselves some space in between each other to be sure we wouldn't run over each other. Bob Moyle went down first. First, the only way we knew how to slow down or stop was to make a 6 mark. Just plop and then get back up and start again. And as I swung around a corner, here was Bob just coming up out of the snow on the 6 mark with my skis headed right straight for his back. I started to whoop and holler and spread my legs so I could straddle him, but his head was just a little bit too high, or at least it seemed like I thought it was going to be. But he finally recognized what was happening, ducked, and I went on my way. Just
funny, in the early days when Joe started up there, you know, you sometimes only get 1 trip a day, because you have to walk so far and back up, you know. He was out one time.
You had to walk.
He was out one time with Eddie Hawkins, and then they went in the morning on a Sunday, and they were gone all day long. And she'd come down to my house. I was worried about Joe, and she was worried about Eddie. Pretty soon they finally come about 5 o'clock, and they'd had 2 rides, and they'd been gone all day. And 14
Clear on
degrees
this side, Bob.
below zero. That's fun skiing nowadays. Now, of course, we make it pretty easy with the lifts for them. Where we were yesterday, it'd be a fine place for you and Mitch to go.
Where was that?
Sundance.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's a big open space there just as you turn off, you know, and oh, the hillside's just great.
Well, we were there for 4 hours yesterday and got 8 rides. So the lift is a mile long. It takes about 20 minutes to get up the lift, and then 10 minutes to get to the
5
bottom,
minutes down
and 20 minutes to ride the lift back to the top. But you're running a mile when you run, so it's really not so bad.
That was at Alpha, you said.
crowds or anything.
Oh yeah, with 25 chairlifts, they can. The only time that it really got crowded is the everybody trying to make the last run of the day. It was pretty. Everybody just down to the bottom to get one more trip up
One
to
more
the
trip
top.
back up, yeah.
And it was all 15 or 20 feet. We went through the tunnel. The road was just tunneled through. And there's all the snow on both sides. Oh! Barney and his girl were staying up there for the weekend for their honeymoon. That's Dale and their sons. And all they'll see out there, beautiful. Oh, they're in an elegant place. All they'll see all week is snow. They can't look out
They're not going to be looking out the window.
They can look out that window. No, they probably won't. That's true. You see the window or the room, you'd swear they'll never get out of bed. But it's just, oh, snow. You know, I'm not thrilled with the snow. I don't like the snow. Or it was deep. But down at the ski area, there's lots of snow there. There's lots of people skiing.
There's more snow in Park City than I've ever
Oh,
seen.
yes, they've been having a lot of snow.
Well, the newscast yesterday, I was driving around someplace, or maybe it was the day before, says, what does the UPI and the AP have against Utah? He says, let me read you the ski report. He says, Vail, 30 inches. And he goes up and down Colorado, 24 inches, 12 inches, 15 inches. And he says, they never say anything. He says, now let's turn the page. And he turns it over, Alta, 105 inches, Park City, 130 inches.
Park City's had a lot of, they've had 10, 15 inches this time.
Well, they can keep it as far as I'm concerned.
You and me both, Alice. I don't want it part of it. We can't kick it our winter. We've had an open winter.
This otherwise mild day you're having here, this is typically San Antonio in most winters has one day about like this, which raises its winter day.
We've had quite a few.
Only this winter we haven't had one nearly this cold and cloudy and miserable yet. We just skipped it completely.
Did you miss all that heavy rain you had? Did you have heavy rain?
Every once in a while we
Like waves. The open pools were habitat for wild ducks and geese. The open spring holes were a hazard for livestock. An animal reaching for a drink of water would plunge in and for lack of foothold was in danger of drowning. We were all alert to the problem and to quickly summon help. With ropes and horses, the cow was soon returned to solid ground. Apparently once trapped, an animal learned to avoid the hazard. There was a story frequently told about a neighbor boy who was handicapped in speech and mental alertness. He was assigned by his grandfather to ride through the fields and report any incident to his grandfather. He was rewarded with a quarter, 2 bits for each valid report. Upon finding a cow in the water, he would ride rapidly to the ranch and excitedly report, cow in a pinghole, Bampa, cow in a pinghole, cow in a pringhole, Bampa. His reward was later canceled when he was discovered riding around a bunch of cows and calves, waving his hat and whooping in loud shouts, trying to increase his income by forcing the animals into the pools. The advent of power tractors, mowers, and hay balers was in the future. The hay harvest followed in this sequence. 2 men were assigned to the horse-drawn mowing machines. They followed one after the other around the field and spring holes to cut the tall grass. After the grass had cured, Ted Bagley had the job of raking the dead grass into long straight rows with a many-tined rake pulled by one horse. At the desired place, Ted tripped a gear which lifted the tines, leaving the hay in a rounded pile in line with the last pot. Several of us took wagons fitted with high racks. Each wagon was loaded with a towed conveyor type loader which lifted the hay grass into the rack. The hay had to be shifted away from the top of the loader to all parts of the wagon and stomped down by walking and jumping to get a full tight load. When loaded, the wagon was pulled to the ranch yard for unloading into a stack. Immediately another wagon was fastened to the loader to continue a day-long process to keep the cured grass going into storage for use in the long winter months to feed the cattle and horses. Will the kids get a picture of that?
Yeah.
I was thinking that she was there.
The raked hay was always aligned due north and south. The long-mounted piles were called windrows. The reason for the alignment was soon evident. The wind always would blow 5 or 6 days from the south, then reverse itself for several days from the north. The loading had to be done with the wind. If otherwise, the hay at the top of the loader was scattered back onto the field. And I mean, it just turned over backwards.
Now, what's this you?
Out in Callio.
Oh, out in Cali.
Wait just a minute, I gotta ask you, what's our zip code?
4084.
That's what I thought. So I've got Allie's on the phone and I wasn't sure.
The hay was all harvested by the middle of August. This left more time to go to the hills for wood, to fish, to explore the mountains. These outings would last 3 or 4 days, rather than the overnight affairs on weekends as previously.
Well, they're both here.
I had chosen Dick Mooneye for one of these latter excursions. He was frisky and difficult to manage. Mostly we got along fairly well. On the trip back to the ranch, about a mile from home, Mooneye sensed we were going home, but not fast enough to suit him. He ran like the wind. No amount of pulling on the reins or shouting "whoa" had any effect. I was in for a fast ride. I concentrated on staying in the saddle. As we approached the ranch gate, I expected him to jump and brace myself for the leap. The horse continued at full speed, but apparently decided he couldn't do the jump. He abruptly came to a stiff-legged stop with his withers against the bars. I catapulted over the fence, landing face, elbows, and knees in the dirt. Memories of the crippled pony and the water ditches returned. Other than some slight scratches, bruises, and a bloody nose, I was not hurt. I can't say as much for my pride. This was not a good performance for an up-and-coming cowboy. I now understand the Bagleys concerned about my choosing Dick Mooneye for my string. I have to make an insert. I haven't got it done yet to get down to you, but I was an avid reader of Zane Grey at this point. Zane Grey stories were the ultimate. And while we were out in the hills, on one of the pine nut harvests, just before we started the roundup, there was a party showed up and stayed around with us for a couple of days. And I had the impression at the time that what they were doing was hunting mountain lions, but not to kill him, they used ropes and dogs and pulled him down. He photographed him and pulled him down, and apparently they were donating him to a zoo or a menagerie someplace. And I came home with the idea that somehow this was Zane Grey himself, the old duffer that told stories at the campfire. So, and then it got away from me, and I couldn't. Gosh, he surely wasn't still hunting lions at that point. I'd read his books and assumed that he was long gone. But I went over to the library here, 6-8 months ago, and found both a biography and an autobiography, and fixed the date that he was on a lion hunt in western Utah that fall. So I've got to put a little sketch in there about hunting lions with Zane Grey.
I wonder if any of my kids have ever read any of Zane Grey.
It's hard to
Did
tell.
you read Zane Grey, Steve?
I've only read one or two, I think, in my whole life. Zane Grey.
Sis, Alice May, was
Sis
just
reads
an
it.
avid Zane
Yeah.
Grey fan.
I got a new one here. Alleen's looking for somebody by the name of Don Douglas Curtis Leffler.
How you gonna find
Don
Douglas.
Douglas.
Curtis
Oh, a long
Leffler.
song.
Well, you know Don. Don was the first, was the second boy.
Amber's.
Amber's boy. And Curtis was the first. Or was it? Yeah. No, Farrell.
They're
I'll bet it's one of their kids, their grandchildren.
one of Amber's grandchildren.
Yeah, Kurt's children's. Either his son or grandson, but I wouldn't know.
I'll tell her what that
It's
is.
a combination of Don and Curtis. And what was the third name?
Leffler.
Well, she's got Don Douglas Curtis Leffler.
Well, those are all, Don and Douglas and Curtis are all first names. I was thinking there might be another family name mixed up there, and Douglas might be too.
We're confused.
She's trying to get hers straightened out, so she can get it down.
Who is?
Alice, I say that you're trying to help her remember and get.
Well, just remembering, yeah. I wouldn't have any idea of starting a family history for her.
You see, they don't.
But the only way we're going to get her on the tape is to lead her with an interview type thing.
Okay.
Well, what about so and so, or when did this? And that's about the only way we're. She's sure having an awful time.
Okay, I will. Come see us when you can.
An awful time.
Yes. Really awful.
That business the other morning about where Custer Lois words was almost awful. My hair kind of raced on the back of my head a little bit.
Oh, can she help you out any?
No, she doesn't know any more than I do.
Don't she?
Amber's been living in St. George for
Amber.
a couple of years.
Now, she was Kurt's wife.
Kurt's wife.
Her,
My brother Curtis's wife.
did Kurt have children? Did they have children? 3?
3 boys.
What?
Was Veldon and Don and
Farrell.
Farrell.
Farrell was the oldest.
Farrell and Veldon and Don, I guess they were.
He was born before Kurt went on his mission.
Now, she wouldn't be able to help you much, Amber. I mean.
Well, she's done a lot of research, so
Oh, has
maybe
she
she could.
really?
Yes.
Oh, well, then she would help.
If
Well,
Mickey Eileen is really interested, she ought to discuss it with Amber, because Amber told me one time that she was an enthusiast as much as Sloth or Hazel's girl that worked in the bank. Camus. Youngest
Which
Prescott
one?
girl.
Oh, Lila.
Lila.
Too darn many relatives and too spread out.
Yeah, that's.
20 questions to get an answer to
They're still asking me 20 questions, Steve.
You haven't changed that.
No, I haven't changed. I start and then, you know, I can't finish, so they have to start questions. I've done pretty good, though.
Well, we called Sis and asked her to write down some things that she remembers. Since she was the oldest, she should have seen more than the rest of us. Because I don't. There are some stories I've heard. I'd like to get the reaction you gave me that one time down at St. George when I asked if you tackled Dad. But
If I tackled Dad.
tackled Dad in the hall the first day you saw him at school.
She set her cap right then, didn't she?
You always said that that's the way that you saw him the first day at school, and you tackled him.
Lola was going to fight you for
Lola
him.
was just fighting for her, and I told her to
Just
stay.
that too. They moved right aside of me, and he's got hold of an arm. And
Lola says he's mine, and I says, the hell he is. He's mine. You keep your hands off. That was his first day in high school.
You set your cap right now, didn't
Lola settled for somebody else who went to Colorado. She's never been back. Well, she says, he's for me. And I said, oh, no, he isn't.
Was there an extreme scarcity of boys, or was he of
He
that
just
caliber?
I was the newest one that moved
he? He
into
just
town.
moved into town.
Now, you're both born in Park City, but you never crossed paths until high school, junior in high school?
High school.
High school.
Senior. I was a senior, and she was a junior.
Well, did you grow up in different parts of town? Or did
Park City is such a big
Well,
town.
Jim left there when he was 6.
Well, I was only 6 years old when we left, and of course I didn't range around much. My neighborhood was in the neighborhood, and hers was in the neighborhood down in the lower end, or over in Deer Valley,
No.
down the lower end.
Just in the, well, midtown, really. Not, I think it was
Did you always live in that one house of your mother's?
where Mama lived, I think, was the longest street, the place that I was at the most, really.
Were you at that house when that was where you were living when you met Dad?
so you,
Yeah.
well, you missed a lot of school. That's the reason you were the year behind. How come you missed so much school?
Me?
Yeah.
I guess I was stupid, I don't know.
No,
Did you move around?
no, I've got a better explanation than that. They made a change of age. It was for a while that if you turned 6 before, somewhere within the year, and you could go to school if you had some aptitude, you could get in the first grade, which I did. But she was excluded from that and couldn't go until she was in her 7th year. I was in the 6th. This was a school administrative change that created that delay. Wasn't any problem in school. You went through all the grades.
I thought you'd moved back and forth to Park City. So you stayed in Park City all the time?
All the moving for her was done before she came along. If they went any place after that, they would just strictly to Camas to visit.
Okay, your father died when you were 2 years old, and you were out in Roosevelt or
Someplace
out there.
out in that area.
Ioka.
Well, could have been Ioka or any place really out there, but Mama they were out there.
Well, did you come back to Park City then after his death?
Well, I presume so. I don't
You
know.
don't.
I don't remember him at all.
You started school in Park City.
Yeah, but I don't remember my dad at all.
Well,
No
you're 2
way,
years
shape,
old,
or
you
form.
wouldn't.
Don't recall ever seeing him. I was too small, too young, I guess.
Well, if you were 2,
He died very suddenly and unexpectedly anyway.
What did he die of?
He had, what was it, erysipelas?
Brain tumor.
Brain
is what
tumor
what
sometimes.
was recorded on the death certificate.
How old of a man was he when he died?
44,
Someplace the other
46.
day we were looking at something, 44, I think.
Well, your mother was in her 40s when you were born.
Yeah.
wasn't she?
I imagine so.
Just.
Okay,
Just in her 40s.
You are the youngest of how many brothers and sisters?
Oh, well, there's Hazel and Pearl and Lois and Afton and what?
Has to get off the rock and boat, he
Oh, yeah, I
says.
don't be my boat to gears, don't I?
Hearing that thing, I get
Well, my
seasick.
feet won't reach down there unless I get on
Trying to-
the chair.
Start over on your brothers and sisters.
Well, there was Hazel. This is the oldest one, the one who died during the flu epidemic in
1918.
1918. And so that was Hazel, and there was Pearl, and Lois, and Afton, and
Art.
and Lee,
Art.
and then there was Art and Lil and Kurt and Vernon. So that's
That's
how
10?
many.
That's 9, I think.
That was all, isn't it?
Hazel?
Hazel. Hazel.
Hazel and Pearl.
Pearl.
Lois.
Lois.
And Afton. And you.
And me.
And the 4 boys.
All right, girls.
And then
Art.
Leo.
Lil, Curtis, and Vernon.
And Vernon. So it's 9.
9. Okay, Hazel died in 1918, so you would
The
have
flu
been...
epidemic.
She was 5 years old.
5 years
You were 5
old.
years old. You remember your sister Hazel.
Well, what I do remember is this. She traveled back and forth from Camas to Park City to bring Leland to a chiropractor in Park City, because he had a crippled
The
arm.
guy's name
Who's
was
Leland?
Hatch.
Well, he's a cousin of yours,
Okay.
nephew of mine. He had a crippled arm. As the story goes, his dad probably was responsible for it, but unknowingly, because every day when his dad, Lauren, would go out to start his chores, he'd climb upon his horse, and Leland would follow his dad, and his dad would automatically reach down, take a hold of his hand, and lift him up onto the saddle with him. And this caused his arm was completely crippled. He hasn't ever been able to
obviously a
use
nerve
it
loss.
since. It just severed it somehow inside, but he can't. All he can do is lift it like this, is all. And that, she was bringing him back and forth to Park City at the time of the epidemic for a chiropractor. Somebody told her a chiropractor could cure Leland's arm. And it was at this time that Hazel got sick in Park City, and she died of the flu pneumonia. And that, then the next that I remember of really much is after when we moved to Francis, and I know I didn't have a dad at the time. I mean, I didn't have anyone that I knew was my father, but so I don't know where he was or what.
No, if he was only 2, why he wouldn't.
I was just young.
Okay. But all the rest of them you grew up to know.
Oh yeah.
Other than Hazel,
Yeah.
Okay.
But now Hazel's 3 children. She had 3 children.
And they were around. You knew
And
them.
they're here. They're in the Camas Valley now.
Okay.
That's Grace and Doris and Lila.
Hazel died, then which one of the boys died first, Curtis or Vernon?
Kurt.
Kurt got killed in a mine
Got killed in
accident.
mine where I was working.
Okay, how old was he when he died? He was relatively young, wasn't
39.
He wasn't very old. He'd been on a mission.
He was about 39. In fact, I think I read on the chart that that's what he was.
He'd been on a mission before he went down into the mines, but he got killed. Probably the second time he went down the shaft.
Kurt was I got real well acquainted with him. He was a real nice fellow. Very friendly and he'd been on a mission. They had gone out to, they were living in Park City, and then they'd moved on out to Charleston for him to work the farm out there with his wife Amber. So when he came back from, he went on the mission from Charleston. This was, of course, before I got to know them, but when I came on the scene, he was just coming back from his mission and had gone back out to Charleston to try and make a living on one of the waterlogged rock-bound farms along the foothills between Charleston and Midway, and just couldn't. They weren't making enough to eat on, and the mining business got going a little bit in Park City, and he came in and got a job at the Park Con where I was working, and went he moved his family over. They had a little house just below us down the street where Alice and her mother was living. And at the same time, Tommy lost out his job as the city marshal by a change of politics with the Roosevelt era, and he came out to the Park Con to go to work. So Tommy and Kurt and himself were all working at the Park Con, but at different shifts. And Kurt got scruffed off a skip on night shift, knocked him off the skip, and he fell down the winds, and just really broke him up badly.
But he was married and had 3 children.
3 children.
And his wife was named Amy. Is that
Amber?
Amber North, the North family, prominent family out in
Amber North.
She remarried. Did she remarry?
She lives in St. George.
She lives in St. George. But Curtis then wasn't really at home when you were growing up. He was already...
Well, I was a pretty good-sized kid when he was killed, but I can't remember just how old I was.
But he would have been grown and moved out and living independent. Okay, who did you grow up with as brothers and sisters that you remember being brothers and sisters in your house?
Vernon, I guess. I don't know.
Yes, because Leo had gone. Leo had married and
Leo
gone.
married and gone, and after.
But your brother Art lived right next door all the time.
Oh yes, Art lived right next door to us all the time.
But he was also married, so he wasn't you don't have a childhood association with any of them except Vernon.
Well, you've told me a time or two about Christmases in which they seem to be around. Do you recall any of those?
Who seemed to be around?
Your brothers.
Vernon?
Vernon and Kurt and Leo, all 3. One of them was always Santa Claus. He told me sometimes. Got away.
But you always talked about one of them being Harry. Who was he?
Harry.
Having a lot of hair? No?
I can clue you. Vernon.
Had a lot of body hair. You
undo his shirt and he was just...
Oh yeah, black as... Hair's all over his chest. Probably all over his body. That's the only part I saw.
Well, he died fairly young.
He died of pneumonia, yes. He was... of course, he was next to me.
29.
29.
Did he ever marry?
Vernon, no.
How did he died of pneumonia? How did he catch the pneumonia?
Didn't it caught him?
I was just say chasing Mary Hines.
Was that his girlfriend?
This is one of
This is
those
undercover.
items you don't put in a family history.
Uncomfortable items, huh?
Stop the projector. Stop the recorder.
I remember one night when Mama was just terribly upset because Vernon wasn't home. And I said, well, I know where he is. I'll go bring him home. So I went down, and went down to the house where I knew he was, and I just walked up on the porch. I didn't say a word. I walked up on the porch and just knocked hell out of the door. And in a moment, I heard bed springs bounce. And Vernon came out of the house. And I started home. Mad? Oh, Lord, I was so mad. I could have killed him if I'd had something big enough to do it with. And I says, what in the hell are you trying to do? Kill your mother? And I took him home. But he sure couldn't see him dead Mary Holmes, for sure. She was married with a whole family of kids, and her husband was
I don't remember.
he had his eyes were closed.
Yeah, he had cataracts.
Cataracts on both his eyes.
Charlie Hines.
And he sat there in the house with the rest of her kids, and
Vern
Jim
was
came
there.
in and courted Mary, took her away, brought her back when he got ready, and
Jim, over Vernon.
I said, Jim.
There probably was a Jim among many.
We made a little editorial correction.
Somebody will have to edit.
Well, now,
But Vernon died not too long after that episode of pneumonia.
well, as I've heard you talk over the years, I always got the feeling that there was quite a fondness for Vernon, that you had quite an affection for him.
Well, I got pretty mad at him.
That's what I am hearing now.
Well, it was very, very shortly after this that he got pneumonia. In fact, it was in just a matter of weeks almost.
Yeah.
And there was no antibiotics. There was bottled oxygen. That's all that could be given to somebody. And he died a horrible death. Tommy St. John and I took turns down at the hospital trying to take care of him, do what we could to keep his lips moist, but he just gasped and strained. And Tommy relieved me about 5 o'clock in the evening, and within an hour and a half he came up, and Vernon died in the meantime. But and she'll remember this if I tell the story. Vernon liked to punk at around and play a little bit. He and I were very good friends, but well, gosh, it was a custom in Park City for the young bucks to go to the bootleg joint and have a drink, and then go to the Elks Lodge or the IOOF to a dance. And Alice and I were sitting in the house one evening about midnight, courting, spooning, and Vern came in, and he always dressed like just a neat, always in a blue serge suit, and he always had a white knit silk scarf that he put around his neck, and if he had an overcoat under the overcoat, if not, he'd just put it inside the lapels of his coat, so that it made a kind of a neat, trim, dressy looking outfit. And he made quite a commotion getting up the steps and into the door. As he came in, he pulled off his scarf and whirled it around his head, and he says, "Whoopee!" Headed for the back bedroom. Well, everybody was using coal in their stoves, kitchen stove. In fact, it was the only heat in the house was a kitchen stove, and the coal scuttle was always to the side of the stove. And we heard him go out, and there was the darndest crash, falling down. So we hurried out to the kitchen, look at him, and he was sitting bang flat in the coal bucket, still whirling his scarf. Whoopee, whoopee. So I had to help him into bed, and it could have been from this dashing around in the night with the dances that he picked up the pneumonia bug. It was about that same winter.
Okay, everybody but Vernon lived to mature, but those three lived to mature years. I think I remembered everybody else you named. I know everybody else.
Where did Leo come in?
Leo was
ahead of Kurt,
ahead of
behind Art. But he had gotten married and left town. He went down, he came to Salt Lake and attended barber school and barbered in Salt Lake on 5th East. He had his shop at his own house.
Raised Dalmatians.
Well, his second wife did.
He died of a sudden heart attack when Lou died.
Yes, but his first wife had died.
Yeah.
And they had only one
I don't know
daughter.
whether she died or whether they just separated. I don't know.
Yeah, she died. And then he married again, and it was the second wife that was the dog breeder. Yeah. They finally had to go clear out in Sandy here in the Sandhills someplace to establish themselves. All their neighbors would
Far enough away from
would
the
petition the zoning regulation against the dogs. But he did come to Park City for a while to open up a barber chair, but just except for me and Art and Tommy, I don't suppose he cut anybody's hair. I never did see anybody patronize him.
Well, Kurt, he finally fell down the shaft, didn't he, in the mine?
Well, yeah, we just described that. He got knocked off a skip.
Got knocked off the skip. They tried to embalm him, or did, I guess, and then put him in on a slab in the front room with him on his big front
He was
room.
in his casket.
Well, his casket wasn't in there, I don't think. Was it? But anyway, there's a lot of drainage from his body, somehow. And they had a hose hooked up to him, and the other end of the hose out on the grass, and it killed every blade of grass in the yard.
Formaldehyde. Actually, the hose, it was
liquids that came out of him after he
it
died.
was a tube they had to insert into one of the major arteries around his neck, and that fluid just drained into a bottle, and the mortician took it out and dumped it on the lawn. But Tommy St. George, the brother-in-law, and I drew the assignment to go down the day after the accident and see if we could find any of these belongings, anything that had fallen out of his pocket, and to, if possible, obliterate the scene of wherever it happened. The state mine inspector had already made his inspection and written the final report on the thing. Tommy and I went down, the winds was about a 70-degree angle. This was the same place where just shortly after that I went through my escapade. And we very carefully rode down together on the bale of the skip with our lights flashing onto the side and back, looking for anything that we might see. And we came to a spot on the back wall, what they call the back wall, the roof. And there were just 6 or 8 inches of square inches of skull and hair hanging on the rock there. And Tommy took his carbide light and obliterated it, burning it. I didn't have a very good appetite for lunch that day. We did pick up 1 or 2 of his items, a pocket knife, his lamp, found his hat, his hard-boiled hat, brought them back up.
How frequently did those kind of accidents happen in the mine?
All too frequently in Park City. The little while I worked at the Park Con, there were 4 deaths. And Art helped the mortician for quite a little while, and I drove a time or two. They had an ambulance, a makeshift ambulance service that he provided. And at the Judge, 2 or 3 men got caught in a pocket of gas, and another 2 or 3 guys climbed down to rescue them, and they hauled 6 bodies out of the mine all in one day. And when I went into the mortuary, they just had them out on wherever they could find room enough to put these 6 great big bodies of these men all in one fell swoop. Yeah, Park City was a dangerous place to work. Lots of
deaths.
Well, I understood that you were doing something you shouldn't have been. You shouldn't have been in the mine and got caught. It just blasted or something. Is that true?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh no, I was
The
doing.
bell.
Do you want this description now?
Yeah.
Of course, it's in some of the script that I've written, but Tommy operated the electric tram and loader. He was mostly operating a loader. He and I were on the same shift for quite a while. I got what was supposed to have been a promotion, and I got away from the mining and timbering and was put tending skip. The skip tender was the one that waited at the ore pocket down at the bottom. The ore came in from the tunnels, drifts that went to the right and the left of the shaft, the winds as we called it, and the ore was mined and loaded in cars and brought out and then just dumped through the tracks into a skip pocket which had been built on the roof side of the shaft. So the bucket, the skip as it was called, which was a square steel box on 4 wheels, would be lowered below the station here, but at a point where there was a gate that you lifted and the ore slid out into the bucket. And you closed the gate, rang the bell, stepped off onto a side station, and the engineer hoisted it up. Well, they'd hit a big body of ore and were anxious to get a lot of it to the smelter. The company needed money badly. They were just on a shoestring. So I worked on a midnight shift, while the regular night shift worked from 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and got through at midnight. We came in a little bit before midnight. Oh, they left at 3 o'clock in the morning. Came in at 7 at night and left at 3 in the morning. We came in at midnight, our shift, and we were just 4 or 5 of us on this haulage business. I was tending the skip, and at 3 o'clock the shift going off would blast, would shoot the rounds, and we would come up on the station and call this lunchtime and stay up where the air was pretty good and wait until the air mine cleaned out, used our lunch hour for the blasting powder and smoke to clear, and then go down and work from then until 7 o'clock in the morning, just doing nothing but running that skip up and down, hoisting ore out of the skip into the pocket up on the drift. We were sitting having this lunch. The other miners had all gone out and gone up on top, and the hoistman and 2 trammers and myself were just sitting on the station. The electric motors and so on kept the little pocket back in the rocks kind of warm. It was a pleasant place, fairly pleasant to sit. And a word came down by telephone that was there any way we could get just 2 or 3 more cars of ore up on the surface, up at the loading tipple up on the surface, because they had a railroad car that was nearly full. It was snowing badly, and they'd like to get it full so they could roll it down out of the way and move another car in place before the snow got so bad that they couldn't make the move. Well, the darn mine was smoky and smelly, and there was always a lot of rock falling after a blasting session for 2 or 3 hours. There'd be rocks falling from the ceiling and then tumbling around. But anyway, I agreed to go down. If they only needed 2 or 3 cars, all I had to do was load that skip twice and have it done, and then come back up. Well, I went down and positioned the skip, and when I pulled the ore chute to get it out, the darn trammers on the night shift had failed to break up the heavy rock. In fact, apparently in between the track they put some extra track, called it a grizzly, so that the ore that went down was small enough to come out through the chute, and some stupid guy had moved those extra rails, and so there were big boulders in there, and a little bit of fine ore came out, and one of these big rocks stuck right in the mouth of that chute. And I barred it. I beat on it with a hammer. I had an 8-pound sledgehammer there, and a crowbar, and mine steel, and I poked and I prodded, and boy, the gas was getting to me. The sweat was just pouring off me, and I made one more effort to pry that thing loose some way to get it out, and the engineer took that skip out from under me. He got a signal to hoist. Well, I know I didn't bump the pull chain, and the trammers up there, they insisted that there was a signal afterwards. But anyway, that skip, and that would make a 450 foot run in just about a minute, just about 60 seconds up there. So it was a fast pull on the oar. And I pitched down over the back of the thing. It just pulled it right out from underneath, pitched right down over the back of it. And I had a pair of 8-inch shoes, 8-inch boots. And I never did fasten the top hook. And the edge of that skip caught right in there on my right leg. And up that shaft I went dangling upside down on the outside of the back of that, on the back of that skip. Well, just the loading chute was about 60 to 80 feet below that first level. And I'd watched that thing come and go many a time, and I knew that the only space between the timber on that shaft and the back of that skip was just the length of my boot from the ball of my big toe, from my big toe out to the toe. Well, no way is my body going to go through there. Well, I'm dead, you know. Just what can I do? I can't stop. I can't get off and walk. And as I went through there, I felt a sting on my back, and I was tall enough or long enough that my head was below the bottom of the skip, and apparently my head dangled in like this and then popped right back out after we passed the timber, and then, gosh, here I am, still alive, still going strong. Couldn't breathe. The air was all knocked out of me. And I still knew that I had something to do, because at the very point where Kurt had his accident, there was a tip of rock that would click every time that skip and the rivets on the bucket would hit that rock. We all knew where it was, and we were all kind of cautious about it. So I reached up with my right hand and swung myself around over the wheels on that skip. No, it was my right hand. Swung myself out over the wheels, and just barely got out, tick tick, as it went past that point where the rivets were hitting. And then I pulled myself up onto the bale, pulled myself up with one hand and heaved myself up. There wasn't any dirt down in the bucket. It was empty. I couldn't get any in it. But I sat on the bale and clutched it with my arms, and still trying to get my breath. I hadn't drawn a breath yet, but I knew I had to have my head up above the bucket, or the guy was going to hoist me right on past the station and take me up to the automatic dump in the loading bin up on that upper level and just dump me down in the oar pocket. And I wanted no more of that. I'd had about all I wanted at this point. So I positioned myself where I'd be looking right straight at the engineer as we came past that thing, and watching the light. I had enough conscience to do that. And as the two fellows who were tramming the oar from the pocket out, they were waiting anxiously to load two cars to push them out the tunnel out to the main shaft. They were looking down the shaft. Everybody looked down the shaft whenever there was anything moving. You looked down to see where it was going to come, and I popped into that light. And one of those guys turned to the engineer to speak to him. You know, gee, Jim's on the bucket, Jim's on the bale, and all he could do was and it made me laugh. And I drew a breath, and that was the first breath of air I'd have, and just then my head popped so the engineer could see me, and boy, did he ever stop. And the poor guy just nearly died. He just nearly passed out. The fellow started to lift me off the bale, and I said, I think we'd better be kind of cautious. I may have some problems with my back, because I just got scraped through the 800-foot level. So there was one of those wire stretcher baskets, you know, basket stretcher. They they put a 6-foot lagging, a 2 by 12-foot lagging, eased that down along my back and actually held me against that, lifted me off and put me in the basket and strapped me in, put me on a timber truck, a timber car, pushed timbers in on the carts, on the wheels, took me out to the main shaft. I had to ride it standing up. They had to stand the basket with me strapped in it, and took me up to the surface. Eventually I got into the hospital. I can't remember the trip to the hospital. I don't know. I don't think there was any ambulance service, and anyway the snow was too deep for it to get out there. They must have just put me in an automobile some way. Took me to the hospital, and in the meantime Alice had taken the call. She was on the switchboard, and you could tell that part of it. Put that on the...
Well, it was kind of a leery kind of a situation as far as I was concerned, because something told me.
You can't do it. Of course, the mine office had called for a doctor and some help, report the accident, have somebody at the hospital to meet me. And the switchboards then had a little key. Whenever a call came in, there was what they called a drop, and a little brass plate on the hole where the plug would go in, and the call would lift that, release that latch, and it would drop, and you knew that the call was on that line. And at that point, she sensed that it was something pertaining to me. She's had this reaction right from the very beginning, but anyway, put this...
I've never seen her tell this story without doing exactly what I'm doing right now.
Took the call, and anyway I got to the hospital, and I had to lay there in that wire basket. In the meantime I was feeling great. There wasn't anything wrong with me, but Dr. Clark insisted we take some x-rays, and x-rayed me in the old primitive equipment they had up there. Finally decided there was nothing wrong. We put some iodine. That was the only antiseptic I think they had. Iodine and carbolic acid. But I had a strip of skin taken from the collarbone right to the top, below the middle of my hips, you know, where your Cossacks forms, just about 3 or 4 inches wide, and the skin was just taken completely off, just like you'd rolled a tin can open on a key, and just to the point that it didn't bleed. Bright red, a little oozing lymph, but no blood. And painted it with iodine, which made it hurt worse than it ever did before I had it, and didn't even bother to put any bandages or anything on it, no gauze. I went on the way, and Dr. Clark took me back home. But I guess I'm staying.
What year? What year was this?
I
don't remember it at all.
Well, maybe you and Joe had already gone to Salt Lake.
Well, we went to Salt Lake in '36.
Well, that's about when this was. I could look it up.
Yes.
But anyway, I went right back to work the next day.
Year or so before you were married? Or were you?
Yes, we aren't married yet. We weren't married yet. Courting pretty heavily.
Well, I sure knew when that drop came in the telephone office. I knew that it was something about Jim.
She had the same.
Anybody told me that it was.
She had just left the telephone office, and I had met her the night Kurt was killed too. You didn't take the call, but you were just leaving the telephone office when the call came in on Curtis, and I got her up, and by the time we got down to Dr. Barta's office, you said that there's something wrong. There's something wrong with Curtis. There's a call in from the mine out there. And I went across the street into the sheriff's office and used the phone and called to Mr. Despain. And I identify myself who I was and that I had Alice Leffler there with me, could he tell me how serious the accident was? He said, well, it's pretty serious. Kurt Leffler is dead. They were waiting then for a minor report, the coroner's report, before they could release the body to the mortician.
Well, there was hardly a day that somebody wasn't killed there in the early days. He was off.
But I just had a whole series of incidents right about that time. That one was the worst, but I went back to mining. And like I say, anytime they found a body of ore, they just had to start production. They'd been moving nothing but waste for years, and they had to get some ore out. The foreman sent me in, and it wasn't long after that, sent me into a heading where they had struck some ore, and the tunnel was going on past it, but they wanted to get break out the top to put in an ore chute and start a raise so they could start to mine this on up the fissure and cave it into a chute to be loaded on cars, while the miners were going ahead with the tunnel to start another one a little further over. So they sent me in with we called them a buzzy. It was a drilling machine that had a stinger in the bottom that as you drilled it would elevate itself up to keep pressure against the roof, against the drill. But it just almost barely head high. But they wanted me to get some rounds in there and get it broken out if I could, but they didn't want to hold up the muckers here trying to clean this drift out just ahead of it. So I set up a staging that the fellows, well, we used the car to measure it and put some cross pieces against the timber just so the car could clear it. And then I got up on this thing and I had to drill with my head ducked in between my shoulders, and it was almost not room to run the machinery. And of course the fellows would give me hell because the water and the drillings were falling down on their track and their car was sticking, and we just jogged for a couple of hours while I was getting enough holes drilled along that thing so I could sit around and make room to start the raise. Finally got it done, and boy, the sweat was pouring off me. Real hard work in such cramped quarters. So I just sat down on the head of the headpiece of the timber, disconnected my hoses, threw the hoses all down out of the way in the steel, and told the fellas to throw the hose and the stuff back out of the way, and I'd rest a few minutes, but left the machine lay on that planking, that staging that I had. Took a few minutes rest, and when I stood up to start to move the machine down, that whole son of a gun of a thing just right out from under me like that, just dropped right out from under me. I'd been drilling long enough, and it was set up kind of shaky, I suppose, and it drilled out from under me, and I fell and landed on my butt on the track, and the machine tipped over, followed me down, and whacked me right on the shin. Oh, bloody murder. But I didn't pay too much attention to it. We gathered everything up, and it was stinging, and I pulled up my pant leg and took a look at it. I could see where it was skinned. Went out and went out to the station, out the drift to the station, called up an order for my powder. Pretty soon, the powder man had to make all this up outdoors. So you couldn't bring dynamite down in the mine in quantity anymore. For a long time they just left it on the stations, and they got a lot of problems with it. So the powder monkey as he was called, had to fill the order and mark it and then bring it down and deliver it on the station. And I waited there till he came down. There wasn't anything more I could do except stay out of the way and stay heading there. And as I sat waiting for that powder, that darn leg started to tingle like the devil. So I went to pull up my overall leg, and I couldn't pull my pant leg up over it. It wouldn't come up over it. So I took my pocket knife and split it, and this thing was about this big thing. I had a hematoma. And I mean a dandy, that darn leg was clear out past my toes. So I got someone else to load the round and blast it, and went out to mine and walked out and up. And I was at home when this happened, Mary. You still must have been in Park City. Because I remember sitting in your kitchen there putting hot packs on it. But I met Dr. Clark as soon as he got in the office the next morning, and he looked at that darn thing and wondered what in the world to do about it. Guys, here, that blood comes loose, get an embolism, I'm a dead duck. He couldn't figure out what to do. Finally, he just reached over and got his scalpel and in there and just made about a split that long, and this darn that blood just poured out, a blood clot actually. Then he had me hold my leg here, and he'd start at my ankle, and between us we massaged that darn stuff out of there. And as soon as he got out of there, it quit hurting, felt fine. He didn't even stitch his cut, just left it open so it would drain if it would. I limped around that day and went back to work the next day.
You and Joe going back to work when you had no business.
Back to work. A couple of days later, it started to hurt like hell, so I went back into the doctor, and he had to stick the knife in it again and open it up. He says, "Gosh, Jim, you got to stay off that. What have you been doing?" "Oh, I went to work." And did he ever get me? God bless God. I don't want to miss a payday. But that was one of these incidences, and then again shortly thereafter, we had been using some of the most beat up, old, worn out shovels and picks that you'd ever seen. Well, he couldn't buy anything. The company just couldn't buy anything and didn't buy anything. And the picks had gone out of the mind of the blacksmith shop, and back and forth, day in and day out. And they finally got so that they were about this long. We called them little beater bars. There wasn't even enough metal left to sharpen them hardly. But now the ore was pouring out and money was starting to come in, and one day I was sitting out, well, we were all sitting waiting for powder or something, half a dozen miners that were in that section. And the skip stopped, and the tool tender climbed out, and he started throwing brand new picks. And these were Texas Longhorns. they were just like this. And everybody grabbed a new pick to go up in the stope with. Well, you establish your prior right in a hurry. You carry it up in the stope and hide it behind the timber. Nobody's going to have it. You keep it till somebody discovers where you hid it. Incidentally, they lost a lot of machinery where guys forgot where they hid it. But I had to take a collar brace. That's a 5-foot small lodge pole spacing bar that was used between timber settings. That was the space, 5-foot center space. I had one of those, and I had a coil of primers in the shoulder, and this thing, and the pick on the shoulder, and started up the ladder. The first ladder was about a 10-footer that was vertical, and then it leaned over and went up the footwall of the winds, or at the fissure at about 70 degrees. As I climbed up there, a step at a time, because I was balancing, and just as I reached for in fact I had reached to get the rung that I could reach on, this one like this one, and the rung that my feet were under, out from under me, just nails pulled out and down it went, and this one came off my hand, and down the track I went, down onto the track, sat right straddle that rail on my Cooper bowl. You've experienced this, you know, you say, "Oh damn," or "Oh something else," and you don't know whether to laugh or cry.
Ouch is the word.
Yeah. Finally got that. I guess that's a nerve reaction when you hit that Cooper. I don't know what it is, but I finally started looking around, and here was this Longhorn pick stuck into a tire, right straight up like that, just right to the side of my leg. And I thought at this point, man, if I'd have been 6 inches to the right,
Even the honor and everything they owned with it.
I'd have really been skewered at that time, and that's where I made up my mind. I never went back in the mine after
This
that.
interview would certainly be among a different group of people today.
Yeah. They gave me some work up on the surface for a little while, helping the timbermen and clean up around the compressor room. Just not much. There wasn't really much to do. And that was about the time Albert Seaman asked me if I could paint his store. Whitburn Shaw, the painter,
Started and got drunk.
he had to go get some thinner for the paint, and while he was out he got some thinner for the painter and left his scaffold.
I think he drank the thinner.
Sure he did.
So Albert, I'd done a service for Albert Seaman a time or two, including fixing his super heterodyne radio. Oh, he had a radio as big as that wall over there. It seemed like that wouldn't work. And, Gene, would you go down and see if you can fix my radio? Gosh, Albert, I don't know a thing about a radio. And I think, you can fix it. Yeah. So okay, so I went down and I looked back at that mess of tubes and wires. What do? And turned it on and hit it to the side of with my fist, and it started to play fine. And from then on in, I was the Seaman family hero. I got
The high pillow man, wasn't it? He was the high pillow man.
Oh yes, you bet. So he hired me, and I went to work in the clothing store and stayed there until I left for Fort Douglas in 1942.
Well,
No, 1942.
I often said I was glad my father decided there was a better way to make a living than working in the mine.
What were you mining?
If they didn't die with
Silver,
injuries,
silver, yes. It was a high-grade silver ore over there. Yeah.
if
When
they
they-
didn't die with injuries, they either got killed or got silicosis. So it was death.
When we moved in here, I discovered a fellow over here that was named Muir. He was dying of silicosis. He was dying of, he was a little older than I. But he was working in the mine. In fact, he was one of the trammers. He was one of the trammers that was looking over that rail. He wasn't the one that made all the commotion, but he was one of the trammers. And, well, I went over a time or two to visit with him. He couldn't get out. He was on his last legs. They moved out very shortly and went up into Midway where they'd come from. But he had come to work just a few days before. I'm pretty well acquainted with him, but he started to brag. And here goes some language on the video. He claimed that he was the man with 1,000 assholes. Well, what do you know? And after so many bets and so much commotion, sure enough, he'd moon everybody, and he had scars all over his buttocks and his legs. And the story was that he and a brother were trying to drill a well over in Hot Pots in that tufa rock out there, which was easy to drill but still needed to be popped with little 1.25 sticks of dynamite in order to break it enough to get through it so they get down to the subsoil and get down to the well. And Farmer Muir decided he was the miner, and he drilled half a dozen little holes with a single jack and load them with a half a quarter stick of powder, and he knew enough to lengthen the fuse, time the fuse. You know, it burns at a certain fixed length, and so you could actually time one would go and two would go and three and go and whatever you wanted to time it in order to break the rock out. So he got it set up and tamped in and lighted the fuse in proper order and started up the ladder to get out over the collar of the well. He wasn't very far up. He'd short fused himself, barely got there, whoa, and knocked him off the ladder, and here he is sitting down. He started banging all over.
That's where he got all his
So up the ladder he again. He barely got to the top again. Down he came again. And I guess he went down 4 or 5 times like this. On the way down, he met one coming on the way up, and I guess he was in the hospital for weeks, picking that toofer rock out of the seat of his pants. And every time they had to make an incision, so he just, so he wasn't the man with the iron mask. He was the man with 1,000 beeholes. So we started to talk about that and laugh over there the day he...
Now, how can anything like that possibly be funny? That's a horrible
It wouldn't
story.
be then, I guess, but later...
Well, he thought it was a joke after he got cured, but I bet he didn't think a while was going on.
You can imagine the
Running up and down that damn ladder. That's the kind of a thing you see on that crazy cat-eared bird and coyote story, isn't it?
Boom, bang, boom, bang.
You're speaking of the mining, you know, of course we never had ambulances, you know, to go after the bodies or injuries up to the mine. They went, and I was on the switchboard one night, and I had to call Kimball's, and I can still remember the number, 21 was Kimball's, all the years I was there. And somebody was killed. I didn't know who it was or anything, but anyway, they took it was good weather, so they took a and from Barry's, no, it wasn't Kimball's, it was Barry's up at the head of Main Street, and he went after the body, and jogging down King Road, he lost the body. When he got to the mortuary, he had no body. At the time, I know who it was, but I don't anymore. But he lost him on the way down. He didn't miss him until he got to the mortuary. Had to go back and pick him up. Learn for a let dead miner in the road. They're funny now, but they weren't so funny then.
It's another one of the things that they didn't discuss in too much detail with the family, did they?
No, sure didn't.
Yeah, we don't.
Uncle Jake will be late for the funeral. We're gonna go find him.
Uncle Tommy, as we call him, Tom St. Joe, Alice's brother-in-law, operated an air-driven loading machine. Long last, with the increased income, they were able to buy a mucker. They call it a mucking machine, run by compressed air. It's a little compact thing that Tom rode on. Well, it could be mounted and operated from either side, depending on the space that was in the drift or wherever you're doing the work. And Tommy, there was a little scoop bucket that very short lift. It just brought it right up over and over the top of the engine and into the car, which was the mine car, which was towed behind. Tommy had an awful time with the gas, the bad air in that mine. He would just get so deathly sick, just so deathly sick. And of course he was a tenacious son of a gun. He'd never quit. But you'd scoop into that loose muck that was just loaded with glycerin and dynamite powder, and whip that right by his nose and just back and forth and in and out and back and forth loading that car. And pretty soon he'd have to topple right off that darn machine. Have to go out by the station where the air was fresh and lay down on the wagon until he could get going again. In the meantime, somebody else would have to operate it. I never could manage it. I tried it a time or two, but it took a certain rhythm to be able to make it work. What else do you want to know from your mother?
Anything she can tell us?
Well, I don't know that I've ever told you kids about the one time that I was with my dad. And I don't know whether I think at that time we're headed from from the Uinta Basin, they were headed into Heber because Dad was sick. And he had, they called it erysipelas. I don't know what that was, but that was what they called in his head. There was something that you just...
Well, erysipelas is a skin infection.
It's a skin infection. I thought it was something inside his head because he... But anyway, he... one particular little story that I remember, I don't know where I got it, but I'm sure it must have been from Mama that told me about it, that she and I and Vernon were in the wagon, and Dad was driving, and they came to a spot where there was a little creek running, and so he decided that the horses should have a drink of water. So he drove right over and hooked the horses in such a way that they could reach down and get a drink of water. And Mom says that I started calling him, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. And the horses were noisy and drinking, and he couldn't hear he couldn't hear me till I called 2 or 3 times. I called 4 or 5 times, Daddy. And finally he looked at me and he says, what did you want, honey? And I said, hello.
Couldn't remember what she wanted.
I called so many times I forget what I was going to ask you.
It's happened more than once.
What did your dad do for a living?
I don't know. He was out in the reservation area someplace, so I suppose he was some kind of a farmer. I
Had to
don't
be
know.
a farmer.
Were you born in Park City?
I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Born in Park City, was I?
Yeah.
I think he drove dray teams.
He drove.
He and Art
Art
would tell me that they both worked together with hauling ore and hauling grocery supplies and so on. Everything done with horse and wagon. They called it drayage. And your dad apparently owned horses or had available horses, and both he and Art worked together. Art's told me this, that they worked together on the dray business. But he finally decided to go out. Well, it was the homesteading section on the reservation, and when they opened up the land out there for homesteading, and went out to join that rush. Everybody that went out was going to get rich. But it got to be a kind of a poverty-stricken thing before they finally got some oil and uranium or something to get rich on. Although there was an awful lot of fine produce grown out there.
Well, you met Dad when you were 17 or 18, junior, senior in high school, 16, 17, 18.
17.
And you didn't get married until you were 24. What happened in those 6 years in between?
You're impertinent.
You're talking.
Next question.
Well, we kept company, all right, but her mother was just scared to death. She was going to lose her last child. It was a ticklish situation to work around Grandma Thompson or Grandma Leffler and agree to a marriage date. In addition, my employment was very, very shaky. There just wasn't very much money. Alice was working at the telephone office. For a while I was working out at the mines, and then went to work for Albert Seaman. And only until then that, when she got married, she lost her job. There was no...
Well, you didn't stay on after you was married.
Well, there was a rule against it.
You couldn't be married. Couldn't be married. Huh?
Couldn't be married and work for Bell Telephone.
Judas, they didn't pay you enough anyway. You might as well
I'm
quit.
not worried.
So we finally decided to get married. And Albert let me have a couple of days off. We got married on the first day of July, first midnight of July 1st, the hottest day of the year. The Salt Lake Temple was like a smoke oven. Oh boy, that was when we went into the terrestrial room, into this cold and dreary world. The sweat was just pouring off everybody. It was anything but cold or dreary, I'll tell you. But we went, it was a holiday, the 4th of July weekend holiday. We took Vernon's, well, your mother kept the car. She paid the balance on Vernon's car with the insurance money. Kept the car. We borrowed some gas from Art down at the Conoco service station and went to Yellowstone for 2 nights and 2 days for a honeymoon. We didn't take time to tell
Mama where we were going.
And when we got home, I tell you,
Took her Scotch Blast.
we were in hot water.
She wouldn't talk to us. She wouldn't.
She had gotten puppy and went out of the house and down to Curly's.
Went down to Pearl's, and she wouldn't come back to the house.
Boy, was she going to come home. Well, this is a poor way to start off a marriage. Well, I took my hat in my hand and went down and sat at the kitchen table in Pearl's house. The girls left and Pearl left, and she and I sat and talked. What did she think? That I was going to climb in and go with you? Well, the fact of the matter was, wherever we went that long, she did. I think that's the reason we did it, why we did. But she finally came back up home with me, and we lived in a kind of an armed truce until Alice May was born. And after Alice May was born, then all was forgiven. We got along pretty good. But she resented my stealing her last child. When she finally got sick, she lived most of her last years with us, one place or another.
Yep. We brought her back to Park City to die when she died.
Went to work for the Boy Scouts and went to Logan when we moved in the big house at Smithfield, which you two younger boys don't remember, but Jim does. She came to live there. As soon as we moved to Ely and got established, she came out and lived with us there. And it was in Ely where she had her final sickness. We had her in the hospital, the Ely hospital, the downtown hospital, for weeks, I guess it was weeks. Yeah. She just would talk about nothing else but going back home. She wanted to go back home. Talked to Dr. Smirnoff about it, and he said, Jim, if you can get her there, just as well. You just might as well. So we rigged up the mattress in the back seat and toted her to Park City. I just barely had time enough to get back home. Got word that she died, so I loaded all you kids into the car and headed for Salt Lake. And as we got out on White Horse Crossing, you remember it well, Jim, I guess, don't you? Yeah. The sky was clear and blue, there was a wind blowing, and we went up over a rise and down around a little shoulder and swooped down into a swale, and it was blizzard. The wind was blowing snow down through that thing, and snow plows that had a trench just barely wide enough for one car. I tried to slow down, and all I was doing was sliding and slipping, and out of the snow came another automobile, and well, we didn't quite miss. We collided front headlights, didn't we? Got stopped. The other fellow climbed into the snowbank. He had control enough. He got into the snowbank, but I just couldn't pull mine in. As soon as we got where we could, I got stopped. Well, I directed you to go up to the top of the hill, and then when you stepped out of that car, you just went skip-rattle clear across.
Slick.
Slick.
Just icy slick.
You nearly had to crawl on your hands and knees to get up there, and Alice May went the other direction to stop traffic because we expected it.
Well, and waving cars until you got those things dug back out and pulled up out of there. I can remember the other guy was madder than a hornet. You know, he was upset and angry and couldn't understand how anybody could be in these kind of road conditions could be driving at those in that manner. Yeah, there was no whisper of a problem until you dropped in that swell.
Just within 10 yards.
Just gorgeous.
Traveling along at 50, 60 miles an hour, and all of a sudden there was no way to...
There was no road.
A funny follow-up on that, and I'm sure I've told you guys about it. We just greeted each other because he knew who I was and I knew who he was. He was the head cashier at one of the banks in town there. the one that I kept my overdraft in. So we each went our separate ways. My insurance was carried by the Boy Scout Council in Reno, and his was carried by the same company but in Denver. And both outfits proceeded to file suit against the other. They couldn't get a claim through for settlement on expenses, and they started to file suit. And when it finally reached the point of hearing, here it was, one insurance company's agency suing another, the same insurance company's agency in a different region or district. So that was the end of that. They settled both claims. There wasn't really much. Well, we had to stop as soon as we got out of the storm and pry the fender off the tire. Front end, one headlight was gone.
What kind of a car was that?
There's a Ford, 6-cylinder Ford sedan, all white, with an overdrive.
This is around 51.
Well, it'll be about 52, 53.
52.
No, 49. It was a 50. It was a 50 model automobile. 52 model. 52 model automobile. Just before we went to Reno.
Well, Grandma died in 52.
No, well, it was a 51 then. But I had two of those in succession. Drove them each 100,000 miles and made money with them at 5 cents a mile for gasoline. Long miles. I put that overdrive on that thing and just go and go and go. Never have to touch the brake except when I get to Reno or back to Ely. Just never had to reline brakes. And in all the miles that I drove out there, the only time I had any trouble mechanically was in a snowstorm on the top of Carroll Summit, and a fuel pump went out, and I was stuck for 5 days in the snow drift, in the snow at what they called Eagle Gate, about 60 miles east of Fallon. Sat there in a little combination cafe and bar, playing canasta and cribbage. And about 5 carloads of us hung up there. But it took me 5 days to finally get behind a snowplow and follow them into Fallon, and from Fallon into Reno. It was like summer. No, it's like this out here.
Well, what are some of the things that you did for dates? What did you during those years?
You had a group, didn't you? Wasn't there a crowd of you that went out together?
Well, Paul and Viv Garnes were there in Park City.
Well, they were our closest, I guess, but we were always with the
About
group.
our closest
A lot of
friends.
house parties. We did go into a lot of surprise parties and house parties. And I guess the thing we did most, Ruger had what he called a lucky dollar.
Lucky
Lucky something. He bought 5 tickets to the movie house for $1. You could find $1 and you could buy one of these, and all 4 of us would go to the picture show and have one left over, and gradually we'd buy another one and have one left over, and finally we got enough 4 leftovers to go to one more movie.
What are the things you know, Jim?
What do I know?
Yeah.
About what?
Mom, Dad.
Mom?
Gotta get
I got told
Steve's
to shut
voice
up.
on here.
Which one of you kids was it that I,
Me. Was me too?
yeah, that I sent you back to the store with some peanuts that,
was
you stole out of the bag, out of the barrel?
That was Alice
It
and
was
I.
Alice, May, and you?
And if it had been peanuts, we wouldn't have got in trouble, but it was almonds, and I
Was
couldn't
it?
crack them on the way home.
That was from Mel Kidder, wasn't it?
Yes. Down over the hill.
Steve, do you remember the day that we got spanked with the ping pong paddles immediately when we came home?
No, I sure
Yeah,
don't.
huh?
I sure don't.
We went down across the highway, and when I came back, Mother was waiting for us with a ping pong paddle.
See, Steve never got in any trouble.
I know he didn't.
I only remember getting spanked once. And what it was a Sunday night. And Dad was sitting working on something, on some papers. I have no idea what it was, but I suspect now, based on my own disposition, that it was probably having something to do with finances. But it was a Sunday night, and I had not eaten dinner because I didn't like whatever dinner was, and so I had picked a dinner and I hadn't eaten.
Peanut butter.
I must have been about 5, I guess, something like that, and I hadn't eaten dinner, and I finally whined at Mom until Mom let me, okay, go get something to eat. And there may have been a box of sweet cereal in the cupboard too that was enticing me. I'm not sure what, but I went out and fiddled around in the kitchen and got the cereal down and opened up the box and filled up the bowl. Went to the fridge and there was no milk in the fridge. And I went to Dad and whined about there being no milk, and I got it. And the cereal sat on the table and I went to bed.
Where was this?
This was in the Gwilliam Creek.
Gwilliam Creek?
I was about 5. That's the only time that I can ever remember getting spanked. That time.
I picked him up yesterday and was going to bring him out today, and I didn't do it. We were over Gwilliam Creek a year and a half ago, and I took pictures. There's nothing there. Absolutely not. Well, it's a housing trap.
Oh, is it?
But the foundations, the fireplace still stands.
Or the building
No,
fireplace.
in the one that was in the house that we lived in.
Rock fireplace, yeah.
That was in the house the chimney still stands there. The fireplace still stands there, and you can trace the foundation rocks, but the buildings are all gone. The septic tank that we dug to the side of the house is caved in. The cesspool, I guess it was, is caved in. And you can identify almost everything. You could identify walk down to where do you remember the time that you and Bob dammed the little irrigation stream that ran through the corner, and the Critchfield, was that his name, from down below, came up with his 6-gun strapped on his hip, someone was violating his water rights.
Yeah. You remember the night we fell in the river, don't you, Bob?
Oh, yeah. We were out walking and we fell in that river and it was moving underneath. There was a crust on top and we broke through and the water was moving underneath, but we were in the river. You remember it would have been Steve Coleman?
Yeah.
When we went on that hike that one day, and we went down around the road and came way down to the backside and turned around and coming back up, and he started screaming and hollering.
Oh,
we
they're
were
so
lost.
upset that it was lost, that we were never going to get back home.
We were never going to find back, and so he made us go all the way back. But before we went, we marked where we were. It's only 100 yards and we'll be back home. No, we had to go back. So we marked where we were, and we walked all the way back down that road and back up the road and came up and went down that big open field, walked 100 yards out into the field and picked up our marker. You wouldn't believe us that we knew where we were at.
Speaking about water turns, of course, it was an eternal problem, stealing water and losing turns and fighting. Mr. Bagley had a water turn up here on the place on Highland Drive in Cottonwood. Every time of course the ground was rocky and dry and he wasted water like crazy, but he'd gone up to the head of the green ditch and turned his water down his own service ditch, and by the time he got down to his rock-bound thirsty garden, the water would peter out. It wouldn't be there. So back up the road he'd go and stomp gopher holes and dig out plugs and so on. Came down, and again it had just dwindled. So he asked me to walk up the ditch with him. You walk on that side and I'll walk up this side and see if we can find some place where it's going out. So we walked up by Jensen's. Jens had a beautiful garden. The raspberry plants clear up to your head, little apple orchard. Just a beautiful garden. And as I walked along that ditch bank, there was water just bubbling up like crazy out from under the ditch bank out into the raspberries. And I called Mr. Bagley over, and first I thought it was a gopher hole, lower gopher holes. And he started to dig in that, and when he made about the second scoopful, he had some little 4-inch tile drains. The old Jensen had them fudging up in under the ditch bank.
Stealing water.
Stealing water out into it. No wonder he had a beautiful lush of garden. Well, boy, the old man, very seldom ever heard him swear. He, once in a while, had some, mostly damn or hell. Except once when he called Ted and I little ass wipers.
I have to edit this, aren't we?
Anyway, he'd tear those things out and mash the tile with the back of his shovel and throw the sod back in and stomp it with his boots. And here came little roly-poly Jensen out. What's going on here? And he walked over to make an investigation, was starting to make a confrontation and argue about the water. And the old man took the shovel like that and hit him right side of the head with it, with the back of the shovel. Took the fight right out of him. And he never stole any more water, I don't think.
You know, the 2 years that I sat up in the basement vault at the Weber County Clerk's office microfilming the old, they called them ancient, there were territorial and ancient files that I was photographing, microfilming, and it never ceased to amaze me the number of I mean, that's what litigation was about in
Water.
the early days. Just absolutely what it was
Infringement
about.
of water rights.
And when there was a crime of violence, when somebody got killed, it was frequently with a shovel to the side of their head over a water turn. And the guy that swung the shovel, if it was indeed his water turn and the other guy had it, that was justification for the anger.
That had the same connotation as hanging a horse thief on the spot.
It sure did. Amazing.
Since I've been around Midvale up here, I've bumped into a fellow by the name of Dave Williams, who is a grandson of this gents. He married Alice Jensen, who was one of my school buddies at the Oakwood School. And he asked me if I knew Jens Jensen. I know Jens Jensen pretty well. I saw him nearly bleed to death one day after he'd been hit in the face with a shovel. So Dave had to know about his grandfather stealing water. I laughed and laughed and laughed. He went home and went to his mother's. He's married, doesn't live at home, but he goes every once in a while to help her with some yard work. He asked her if she knew about the time his dad got hit in the head with a shovel by Irene Bagley, and sure enough, Alice remembered. I guess the old man took quite a while to heal.
Your head back for home when you leave here?
Yeah. Yep. Had to work Friday and I have to work Monday, so you can't catch much of a boondoggle into one weekend.
Alice, why don't you? I think you can get by with this one. Why don't you relate to him the story of your not wanting to be in a certain school class with?
Oh, dear. It's Peterson. So I went into the 7th grade out of the middle school there in Park City. And there was a new teacher that came to the school. In fact, he was principal. He was made principal of all the schools after he moved there. And Vic Peterson was in my room, my class. And when everybody got situated, why, I was still in Vic Peterson's room. So I decided I wasn't going to be in Vic Peterson's room one way or the other. I wasn't going to be there because I didn't like him. He stunk. Really, he
Physically?
He stank. He really did.
Smelled.
They lived in Snyderville on a cow ranch. They all stunk.
But But what was the teacher's name?
The new man?
The new man.
I never heard you mention it. All you'd remember is Vic Peterson.
Well, he was a new principal in the school district there, and they took everybody into the one room, and you go in this room, and you go in this, and you in this, and you in this, and you in this, and you in this, and I got in Vic Peterson's line somehow. So after everybody got settled down and ready to start school, I went up and told the principal I needed to talk to him. He said, "Okay, but what's the problem? What do you need?" I said, "My mother doesn't want me to be in Vic Peterson's class." "Oh, why not?" And I says, "Well, she just doesn't want me to have him for a teacher."
Had she said that?
No.
No.
You didn't know a thing about it. And so he moved me into his class.
Oh.
He was the principal, and I had a good
You
school. I had a
just
good
didn't
school
want
here,
it.
but I didn't want Vic Peterson.
His brother used to come to school, and I was dumb as all outdoors in mathematics, and everybody felt sorry for me, I guess, because I had so many helpers. And Vic's brother would come and sit in the assembly room there and help me with math. This is when I was in high school. But boy, he sure smelled of the barn always.
Yes, he sure did.
Always. So I know what she meant. Because Vic lived on the same ranch.
You know, his mother isn't pulling her earring, but she's sure going to wear out the knob on that.
Well, you know, the Aunt Mary was, when we were showing some of the pictures, and Aunt Mary says, she says, "When did I start talking with my hands?"
And when I pulled my earrings, I sat and pulled my earrings, and the one place I went like this, and
Well, it's a known fact that having a camera on you makes your nose itch.
Or run.
so I sat and pulled my ear all the time. So I asked them all, when did I start pulling my ear?
You did it just about that whole taping, I think. I thought you were going to wear a blister.
Well, I guess I'm going to have to be the one to apologize and walk out early again today, mind you.